everyone. Welcome to the Bleeding Metal podcast. I am Kiki, your co host. And today there's three of us here. There is, of course, my co host.
Martha, hi, my pronouns are she, her.
And we have a returning guest today. We had a beautiful talk years ago.
It was awesome. I'm so glad to be back.
Please introduce yourself.
I am Anna Rogers, Dr. Anna S. Rogers, and I had a book that I came on and talked about a few years ago. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm excited to talk about anything gender and metal combined.
Yes, exactly. That was the topic of our last conversation on the podcast. I will link it in the description. And today we are here to talk about the current state of gender and metal. It's how we personally experience it, how we consume things and experience those. And of course, in the context of it is 2025, the world is on fire, things are scary in certain parts of the world, or most of them. But yeah, it's really important that we keep having these conversations. But also, I must say, the idea of this episode came to me a few weeks ago when I was walking home after work and I was listening to music. And for some reason, it dawned on me how gender roles, traditional gender roles, have been swapped in the context of metal lyrics and music. Because we started in, let's say, the 90s with gothic rock and metal, and we had the men doing the growls and the screams and the harsh vocals, and then the women in metal had these lovely airy voices, and so there was this Beauty and the Beast dynamic. And then, back then already, there were a few female harsh vocalists, but there are more and more nowadays. And at the same time, we see male vocalists, especially in the modern metal and metalcore scene right now. We see them talking about heartbreak and the whole baddiecore kind of thing of these sweet tokens and bad omens writing about love and about sex and about heartbreak and all of these dynamics, while we have the Cornelia Plants and so many more in the genre just being brutal and allowing ourselves as women to express rage, which is so very valid in this world nowadays. So I wanted to hear from you both how you see that, and if you find it interesting as well.
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Oh, you go first.
Okay. So I think it's so fascinating, and I think it's so interesting because the thing I keep thinking about is like how some things can happen so quickly in change, like not just in metal, but any pop culture item. Like some things change overnight, and then other things can take like decades to change. And so I think song lyrics have always been specifically what interested me the most about metal, which usually people are pretty surprised by. For some reason, they're like, oh, I thought it was like you just like that heavy sound. And I'm like, no, actually, like it's definitely the lyrics 100% that what drew me in. And I think it's interesting to see that switch that you're talking about too. So I know, like, for example, Butcher Babies has always been one of my favorite womenful bands. And I went to school where a lot of my students who do not listen to me, but have taken classes where I teach them about metal music, had come up to me and were like, what did you think about the announcement about Carla? And I was like shocked that they knew anything, like names or places or anything. And they were like, oh yeah, I saw it on TikTok or I saw it somewhere else. And so it had infiltrated into like non-metal areas and spaces on social media to the point that my students knew about it, remembered it, and then were asking it. And so I thought that it was really cool to see, one, that I think that the change up maybe is, and I don't know for sure, so I don't want to say this is just like me thinking as an opinion, but maybe opening the door up a little bit more, bringing in more, I don't want to call it mainstream because I don't think it's like a mainstream thing, but just bringing in a more diverse fan base than we already had potentially. So specifically, I'm thinking about people who I know who would not say metal music is their favorite genre of music, but they're listening to metal music in addition to other genres. And I feel like that is something that I am seeing at least in my student age group specifically. And that's probably because that's who I'm around most of the time, would be the college student age group demographic. But it interests me that they are having the knowledge on metal. And I asked one of them what the reason was. And this was let's say, I think he's a cisgender man student. And his response was that he saw Stranger Things and had the Metallica song on Stranger Things, which then led him to go look up Metallica. And then he ended up settling on Sleep Token because of the lyrics that Sleep Token had were relevant to his life as a college guy. And that really surprised me. But then when I went and looked, I was like, I kind of the heartbreak, like you just mentioned, as a theme and content. So I think that it's changing and it's having an impact already that I think is really interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, Martha, do you notice this at all?
Yes, of course. And I think my biggest sentiment about it is that I feel so very inspired. And I just, yeah, in retrospect, I just wished more of them were around when I were younger. And I played a show last Saturday. And so there was a student band opening in front of the venue before everything started. And then afterwards, they came inside, and there was just a group of girls, I think, I don't know how old they were, somewhere between 12 and 16. I hope I'm right. I'm really bad at guessing their age. But yeah, so I think they filmed our whole set. So they were with their smartphones up all the time. I'm like, oh my God, she's a woman and she can scream. And they were so hyped. And so after the show, they came to me and they asked if they could take a selfie with me. I was like, yeah, of course. And I was like, I'm so happy that I'm at the point where I can be that role model. I don't know,
Yes.
the Tatianas and everyone were for me. So yeah, it just makes me really happy that these things are happening. And yeah, more of this.
Absolutely. That's such a good story. I love anytime there's like the role model stories with younger girls in metal. Those are like
Yeah,
absolute favorite stories to hear. So that is so awesome.
Yeah. And it also reaffirms our knowledge about how representation is so important, how we really need to see
absolutely.
everything so that or a very wide variety of role models so that we know what we can achieve as well. Yeah, that is so cool. The other focal point of my thinking was also, as a society, it feels sometimes like we're going back, even though like certain communities achieve so much, right? We are progressing in terms of human rights, or we have so far. But with the current governments, or governments that sometimes feel like will get into power soon or something, it feels like we could go back in time. I have a feminist friend here in Ecuador who says they are preparing as organizations, as communities, they are preparing to manage waves of misinformation and a second middle age almost. And that was like very scary, but it also sounds so true. Our former co-host Pia also says that we will probably see a third world war in our lifetime and is mentally preparing for that, which is very grim. But it does make me question, in a little less serious terms, do you think that those advances that we see in the metal community can be reversed as well?
That is such a good question. Wow. So, my first initial thoughts on that would be, ironically, back to what your first focal point was about the lyrics. So, I feel like you pointed out like you're hearing a lot of like male artists and they're having song lyrics about heartbreak, but the women are having a lot of rage in their stuff right now. I think that's reflective of what's going on, like the going back in time for women's rights and having things taken away that we had already fought for and things like that. I think that we can see that gender difference currently and what's popular among the different genders. It does worry me, but the thing that gives me inspiration to hope that we would not go back as a community in the metal scene are the women role models. They're loud, they're putting themselves out there, like they are doing all the things for representation that need to happen. And they're showing that they have something to offer to the community that men have, but also an additional thing that, that uniquely woman, feminine essence, whatever that might be. And they are able to provide that. And that is another thing that we need. That's a cool dimension of metal that historically wasn't being explored because there weren't as many women in metal. And now we're exploring it and people like it. It's working. People are going to the shows. Like literally you saying those young girls coming and recording you at your show and asking to take a selfie. They're going to remember that. That is an instrumental moment in their socialization, speaking as a sociologist. And those are the moments and those are the things that give me hope that we can hold and maintain where we're at. I also think that we see a lot of allies in some of the more, I would say, like vocal metal bands that are really mainstream. And I know, like, controversially, Corey Taylor, love him or hate him, but I feel like Corey Taylor is one of those male artists who has always spoken up about like gender rights. Or I remember when I was going to see Slipknot in, I think it was North Carolina around the time of the big debates around gender neutral bathrooms. And they said, we're not playing in a state that does not recognize rights to humans, period. And so, like, they really took a heavy stand on that. And I think having some of those male fronted, very mainstream, successful bands also helps. So it's like we need the underground stuff and the fighting of women, but it also helps to have some of those allies that are getting a little bit more spotlight, media attention, and things like that.
Yeah, I think the sabotaging can be a double-edged sword, and it's a very personal decision, but it can be so important and it can make such a huge difference. But it also goes back to needing allyship, to something that I also find very problematic in my daily practice of feminism, needing men to speak for human rights and for equality and equanimity and diversity, because it sucks so much that they're the only people who are actually listened and who get political power to actually change things.
It is so frustrating. And I will say one thing that I don't know if y'all have noticed it as well, but one thing that I've been really moved by, and the university that I teach at now, it's like a very, very wealthy, predominantly white. I wouldn't necessarily say conservative, but more conservative leaning than other colleges probably. But I'm seeing so many more students that like are non-binary, and they're using their platform as someone who's non-binary to speak out on all, not just gender issues, but all types of issues. And there's something that I've noticed that, like, and again, I'm not talking about older generations, because the older generations unfortunately are pushing back hard against it, which is what I think shows us that it has power. They're afraid of it,
Yeah.
right? That's why they're trying to control it, because they know it has power. But the other students, they listen. And I hate to say it surprises me to see that, but I do see that happening. Like, even in basic classes where I talk about feminism in a class that's not about feminism. So students are not there because they want to be there to hear about feminism, but obviously it comes up when you talk about gender. They're listening when other students are raising their hands and making comments. And there have been times where there's something I'm planning to say as like a sociological fact, and I don't even have to say it because another student raises their hand and says it before I do. And then you see the students like nodding along with that. And that can be like, honestly, it's like an electrifying feeling to see that in the youth. And times are horribly dark. I agree with you that it's so hard to find right now, at least for me personally, but it makes me happy to see it in the youth all around, not just like for metal, but for fem in general. And the fact that sometimes they genuinely seem surprised if I say,
I have been for the past 3 months, I have been working here in Ecuador, the Ministry for Women's and Human Rights. And we had a workshop about modern masculinities. And the person teaching it was a man, and he usually has only male attendees at these events, because the purpose of these workshops is to deconstruct masculinity, to deconstruct it, and to actually realize how dangerous and how terrible, I can't find words right now, but how hurtful masculinity, the patriarchy actually, and sexism can be for men as well. And so we spoke a lot about the cost of masculinity, like what men have to give up to upkeep all of these stereotypes and standards and all of that kind of thing. And it was super interesting to see what kind of different exercises you sometimes have to do with men to, first of all, recognize their privilege. Second of all, recognize the disadvantages of having that privilege. And then realize, actually, we should just all be equal. And during the workshop, we had conversations, and during one of these conversations, the person giving the workshop said that he is not a feminist man. And I was super outraged. And I raised my hand and was like, what do you mean you're not a feminist? Excuse me. You're doing the goddess's work here. Why would you not identify as a feminist? And he was like, I think that men in general cannot or shouldn't call themselves feminists, because the struggle, the fight, the feminist fight itself belongs to women. Women are the ones who have gotten so many rights, who have done all of these all of these progress who have achieved so much. And it is not on us to speak for them, and it's not on us to take that fight and own it as well. And I do the work that I do, and I of course want equality for all humans, but I would not use or wear that label. And I thought that was so interesting. And it was also even more interesting because just a few days before that, I listened to a podcast, and I can't remember where it was, but I think I have linked it before because I have mentioned it here before. There was an interview on this podcast with an expert who had done a study with men's rights activists. And men's rights activists apparently go through the same process the same process as feminist men. So feminist men on the one extreme and men's rights activists on the other extreme go through the same process of realizing there's an imbalance of power. And one group feels oppressed by that, feels oppressed by women and progressive thoughts. And the other group realizes that, okay, no, women are the ones suffering from oppression. And so what they do is, in order to feel better, they say they're feminists, but they don't really do their own activism. They just do it to feel better. And men's rights activists also feel better because they're the victims. And so as humans, I do think that in general, we try to feel like we're good people and like we are leading good lives. And so that goal can shift us in these directions of, fighting for what we see as our right and just not really doing any activism, but feeling like we're good because men can wear the feminist label. Or I think it happens sometimes as well with like digital activism. If people posted the black square on a specific day during Black History Month or something, then they feel better because they're doing something. And it's not really like that. We have to live these values. We have to have these conversations in our communities, in our families all the time. And it's exhausting, but it's necessary so we keep being, or keep having a degree of freedom. I thought that was really interesting, the feminist label for men. So I have now started to talk more about allies, and I do think that is a complicated issue.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that really interests me in general as a sociologist is just like labels. So labeling theory is one of the most famous theories to come out of like psych or soc. And when I think about labels, I feel like I spend way too much time thinking about them and internalizing them and wondering what they mean. So I really respect that he chooses not to use that. And then when people, I'm sure you are not the only one. I would hope every time he's in a room talking and says that, someone's hand goes up in the air right away to ask him, like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And then he gets a chance to say that. And that's a powerful narrative. So for me, I'm very cool with men taking the label of feminist, but I'm also just as cool with him not doing it because he is able to use that as a teach. And I think that there's always a good time for a teachable moment with the way the world is right now. So I think that's a really interesting and a cool way to approach it. And I've heard of a few people who have said something like that similar before, but I've never heard it explained that precisely and maybe organized. So I really like that. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I thought so too. And talking about labels, that is also a very interesting tangent that we can go on because there are so many. And I have always thought, or I have always felt like labels have been helpful to me. They give me community. They make me feel understood and less alone. But labels can also be so divisive sometimes.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, I do think that they just serve as a means of communication to express how you feel, what you think, what your values are, maybe what your lifestyle is. But I do remember that the moment I found the label of metalhead, of goth, it was in the middle of my teens, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. I'm not the only woman. And because that can be so isolating.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel like that's a really tricky thing to teach in like introductory sociology classes. And for some reason, the label that the question always comes up is when I'm talking about sexual orientation. And I try to go over always like, I don't have time to go over all of the different ones, but I at least cover like heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual. And then students will say, but you just spent the entire semester telling us that everything is socially constructed. So why do you want to put those people in boxes? And so then luckily I have, which I think is a good question to ask, right? And so I luckily have a story from a student who gave me permission to share this, but it was actually my second semester ever teaching. So this was like almost 10 years ago. I was just doing that base overview of what asexuality was. And after class, the student came up to me in tears. And I thought maybe someone had passed away or something else. I had no idea it was connected to lecture. And then the student told me that they had never heard the word asexual. They had no idea that was a normal thing that other people felt, and that they had been having suicidal thoughts since being at college with the hookup culture as prominent as it was. They said specifically with their roommate constantly asking, like, you never go out to bars, you never try to pick up girls. I don't understand it. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And then it got to the point where the roommate was like, I don't care if you're gay. Just tell me if you're gay. And he was like, I don't know what I am. I don't know what to do. And I just felt so isolated that I literally was like, maybe it would be easier if I wasn't here. But just finding out that there's a word for this and I can go home and get on Google and find other people asexual, that has literally changed my life. And then the student literally told me, he was like, please keep telling people this. Please keep talking about asexuality, because until I was in this room in this moment, I've never heard of it. And so I think that is exactly what you said, is if you have people who are marginalized or oppressed, they sometimes need solidarity, and labels become a way to find your community and to have with each other. And then at the same time, I think it's a really powerful if you look at like reclamations of historical words that were used to oppress. So, like, for example, I feel like in the goth culture, there's a lot of research on the word freak. So you get called freak enough times in a negative way. And then eventually you're like, I'm proud to be here, to the point that I know, myself included, multiple people have tattoos that say freak because we literally care so much about that label that was tried to use against us that we choose to mark our bodies with it. And I think that's a really cool, just a cool thing how labels they're complicated, but they're powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the power of language. And language also keeps changing. The word woke is something we saw go from something very positive to something being weaponized against people who are actually, as you were saying before, trying to make the planet better for humans.
Right.
Yeah. But from what you were saying, especially the sexual identity labels, I have seen as well on TikTok with newer, younger bands make that a topic in their music as well. It's really beautiful to have those identities also combined and see how heavy music and the power of expression that it gives everyone can be used for that as well. I keep running into queer or asexual bands talking about that, talking about their experiences with that and making a point of that. Also marketing themselves as that, but more power to them. It's something that makes you special, it makes you unique. And instead of hiding that, you just claim it as your thing. And we do need way more diverse metal scene.
Yeah, I have a good friend. He's the lead singer of he's a goth band, so I don't know if y'all would know it, but Vision Video. There's a really kick-ass band you should listen to. As a metal fan, I'm like obsessed with them too. But I'm friends with the lead singer and his partner, Scarlett. But they had a person who kept commenting on his stuff that it was just a bunch of goth gay shit, and they were tired of it. So he actually marketed it. He went and had t-shirts, stickers, pins, everything that say goth gay shit, Vision Video, and they sell like crazy. And then what he does is every time, I think monthly or something like that, he donates to the Trevor Project with proceeds from the sales of that particular item, and then goes back to that troll and says, hey, this month we sent $3,000 to Trevor Project because you're so homophobic. Thanks. We appreciate it. Great idea for marketing strategy. And so I think stuff like that is just in like a way of trying to take a negative and finding a way to spin it into a positive. And I feel like that's one thing that, and again, that's a goth, they're like goth post-punk. Again, you should definitely check them out. They're great. The community that they build, though, is you feel supported and you have each other's backs. And it's just really good. I think, like you said, seeing these younger groups that are, one, they're not just saying it openly, but they're legit proud of it. And that is awesome. Like, I love to see them claiming their identities being proud of their identities. And when someone is trying to tell them they shouldn't be like that, they're using their passion of metal music to say, I'm going to keep being like this and I'm going to be in your face about it. And that's the kind of stuff that gives me cold chills when I like hear a band for the first time. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that they're doing. And that's what has me excited to also for the future of the scene, is to see what these really young bands are doing. And I think it goes back to, like you said earlier, I wish I was younger with these bands. So like, for example, like I can't get in a mosh pit anymore. I used to love it, but like I did it, I think I did it like a year ago at a corn show. I was so sore the next day. I had even like beforehand, I stretched, I took ibuprofen, I did not wear combat boots, I wore sneakers, and even all of the prep, I was still so sore the next day, I almost had to call into work. So I wish though that I was around for these bands because they're just full of energy and it's really great to see it. And I like that the energy is stemming from them trying to be true to themselves and being supportive of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. There's hope. There's hope in the youth, in the young minds of metalheads. And yeah. But also there's hope in us still going to mosh pits. I love that. I absolutely have to do that. I haven't been in one for maybe 15 years or longer. But I absolutely, yeah, the prepping is a very good idea.
I tried to prep like thinking like this will handle the situation, but honestly, it was not that great.
Maybe like a week before we have to start headbanging like a little every day and then increase it slowly.
Yeah. Have you seen those?
Exactly.
There's a lot of also like reels and TikToks of that kind of thing, like dudes in the gym doing like really weird moves or something. And then they're like, yeah, this is to headbang with my guitar. For this move, this is for the mosh pit. Maybe we should start that too. Mosh pit preparing workouts. But yeah, going back to or trying to get back to the gender roles. No, I love it. I love it. These are all, I could have these conversations for ages, and I could also go into more tangents even, because another one that came to my mind was witchcraft. I'm seeing witchcraft everywhere, and it's a huge interest of mine too, but it's like this renaissance more or less of witchcraft, because in the end, believe it or not, whether you believe in witchcraft for real or not, it's just resistance. It's just a form of resistance, of spreading knowledge, of keeping the archetype maybe of femininity alive, of empowering it. It's taking a stance against these traditional views of how masculinity is the one and all and the thing that should be revered, and how everything that goes a little bit further or sideways or just does not stick to the norm is bad and should be oppressed. Yeah, it's just different forms of resistance. And I was at a bookshop yesterday, and there were like all of these books on witchcraft and on different aspects by different authors. And also the whole mythology retellings in literature that are also bringing back these female characters that have power. I do think that
Absolutely.
everything is always so correlated. Art always is a product of what happens politically around us. And so it's really interesting to see how that affects us, especially as women in metal, right? How we see that. To me, it's really inspiring. I don't know, Martha, have you seen any of this around you?
Absolutely hasn't reached my social media bubble. Or I don't know, not even in my queer bookshop across the street. But yeah, I don't know. I think when I was younger, I had this like Vika witch. I don't know. My big brother, he got me a book and I read through it. And I don't know. I went outside in the yard barefoot at some point at night. I don't know. I remember these scenes. But yeah, I think I lost witchcraft along the way.
That's part of it too, right? The connection to nature, which I don't know. It also comes in waves, I feel, socially. There are times where we're like, yeah, nature, nice. And currently it feels like nature who? Oh, the one that's burning? Like literally.
The one that's burning,
Yeah.
literally. Yeah.
So it's really sad. But yeah, times keep changing and we have to keep talking about this. Yeah, that's gonna be my wisdom of the day. We need to keep talking about this. We need to keep having these conversations. And yeah, funny how our analysis of gender roles was very quick, but we were very efficient, I think.
Yes, I think so too. I feel again, my whole thing is like there was hope,
Yeah.
right? That's the takeaway. Like focusing on positives, that there's hope. And also, I don't know if y'all have listened to them yet, but this was like the number one thing I was going to ask. My favorite newer band that is all women is Tooth. Have y'all listened to
No.
Tooth yet? They are so good. Please go listen to them. They're like, I guess, doom sludge metal, but life changing. And I have been commenting, they're in California, and I comment like on all their Instagram posts. Please come to the East Coast. I don't care where on the East Coast. I will come find you. I will come find you. And they're finally doing a show in Atlanta in a couple of months. And I'm so excited to go and check them out. But they are a band, like lyrically, I feel like I see the connection to literally what you were just talking about, like witchcraft and connection back to mythology and art. And like one of the shirts that I have from them that I love so much is that painting by Francisco de Goya, Saturn, where it's like the monster like eating his, and that's like the cover of the shirt. And then they have a song called that. And it's just powerful stuff to take things that are from hundreds of years ago, and then they're using it in this really deep, heavy metal modern way. It's just amazing. So I was like, my number one note was like, I've got to make sure that I mention Tooth in this interview because it's so good. It's so good. I think you will love it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely check that out. Thank you.
Yeah. We are seeing all female bands also pop up again and more women in metal everywhere. So yeah, it's definitely still worth to keep an eye out for that and to keep supporting them. That
Absolutely.
is so cool. Yeah. Thank you for all the recommendations. What do you have to plug? Are you working on anything cool, interesting? Tell us about it.
So I need to do something with metal again, but with me teaching so many classes, and I'm also now the undergraduate coordinator at my school, I haven't had time to do research. But the big exciting thing that I think is of relevance to our conversation is that I am starting a domestic field study program in Salem, Massachusetts. So every Maymester, students can come and take a class with me where we're going to study the impact of basically the Salem witch trials and legalities behind that, on how that has impacted modern day deviant women. And so as I'm planning the trip for that the students will take, they'll be collecting qualitative research. And my goal is literally to have them go to some local metal shows and then also to meet with local coven leaders of some of the covens up there, some of the museum owners. And so I've had a chance to reach out to some people that I haven't spoken with since 6 years ago when I did my dissertation on witches. And now trying to have more students coming in and getting to literally go there and see what happened to these women just because they were strong or because they were doing things out of the norm or deviant. And so that's like my passion project completely. And I like that I was able to slide some heavy metal in there. Like I literally wrote on my thing, like they'll go to either like your choice of like punk, metal, something goth show. And then I have some of the goth shops up there. So we're going to talk about the goth aesthetic and goth fashion and then also the witches. So it's like all of three of my favorite things combined into one. So I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. And these are my favorite things combined: metal, witchcraft, and feminism.
Literally all the best.
Hell yeah. Yes, that's so good to hear. We will have you back then on the podcast to talk about your project. And yeah, come back whenever you want. We're here.
Thank you. I could talk to you all day about literally any topic because I feel like we like all the same stuff. So thank you so much for having me
Thank
back.
you so much for being here. Martha, what do you have to plug? What are you working on?
Wow, yeah, I'm working on new music. So I haven't, I told many people, but yeah, I found another person to write songs with. And then I actually came back from a very long songwriting session today, and I already sent the result to Kiki, and she seemed to like it. So I hope it's very catchy new music. And yeah, but now I have to learn better distortion and vocal fry in my streaming range. Yeah.
That is so exciting. Can you give us like a little sneak peek of the lyric content theme or like what maybe some of the songs were about that you were working on?
Yeah, so I have a hook, which is about society can scare us. And so it's, I don't know, grabbing all your people and resisting what is happening. So that's like
Awesome.
the lyrical context. And it feels so good screaming that out. Like screaming in general, it's so empowering. I guess it's just like my own way of therapy and then sharing that with other people.
Look forward to all of those songs and all of those projects. And yes, that is it for today.
Right.
So where can people find us?
Yeah, everywhere where there are podcasts. So yeah, if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we are everywhere. And also, yeah, find us on Instagram or on YouTube.
Yeah, and we will be back very soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for the conversations, for the insights. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.